In Minnesota, the name Jaxson James means absolute power, and he just saw the bruises Sarah Taylor was trying to hide. Sarah wore the jacket like armor. Even when the Minnesota sun turned vicious in late July, baking the sidewalks until they shimmered, she kept it on. Heavy denim. Oversized. Borrowed from her roommate because her own clothes had stopped fitting right months ago. Not because she'd gained weight. Bruises take up space under fabric. Long sleeves hide what short sleeves reveal. She walked 3 blocks to the cafe every morning at 6:47 a.m. Always 6:47, never 6:45, never 6:50. Routine kept her safe. Routine meant she controlled something, even if it was just the exact moment her sneakers hit the crosswalk on Hennepin Avenue. The jacket stuck to her back. Sweat pooled at the base of her spine. Her manager, Beth, had asked about it twice last week. "Aren't you dying in that thing?" Laughing, not unkind, just confused. Sarah had smiled. That practiced smile with exactly the right amount of teeth to look genuine without looking manic. "I run cold." The lie tasted like copper. Beth shrugged and moved on. People in Minnesota didn't push. Minnesota nice wasn't just politeness. It was an agreement. Don't make waves. Don't ask the questions that might need uncomfortable answers. Don't look too closely at the girl in the jacket. Sarah's phone buzzed. She didn't need to check it. She knew who it was. Some variation of thinking about you, or miss your smile, or when can I see you again? Words that sounded like affection, but were built from the same material as fishhooks. She'd met him 14 months ago. 14 months, 2 weeks, 5 days. Not that she was counting. He'd been beautiful then. That's what she remembered most clearly, not the later parts, not the bathroom floor or the thrown phone or the night he'd held her arm so tight his fingerprints stayed purple for a week. She remembered the coffee shop on their 3rd date, how he'd ordered for her without asking, and she'd thought it was romantic instead of controlling. How he'd said, "You don't need to work so much, I can take care of you." And she'd leaned into his chest like he was shelter instead of storm. The signs were there. They always are. But signs don't matter when you're convinced you found someone who sees you. Really sees you. He started small. Questions about where she'd been, who she'd talked to, why she'd taken 20 minutes instead of 15 to walk home. She thought he was interested, engaged. She answered every question because that's what you do when someone loves you, right? You let them in. Then came the first time they'd been arguing about her friend Maya. He thought Maya was a bad influence. Too loud, too opinionated, too much. Sarah said Maya was her best friend since high school. He grabbed her wrist, not hard, just hard enough. Just enough to make her stop talking. Just enough to make her heartbeat spike with something she couldn't quite name yet. He apologized immediately, cried even. Said his father used to yell at his mother, and he was terrified of becoming that man, and seeing her defend someone who clearly didn't respect their relationship had triggered something dark in him. He held her face in both hands and promised it would never happen again. It happened again 3 weeks later, then 2 weeks after that. Then it stopped being countable because it stopped being an event and started being a condition of existence. The jacket hid the yellow-green bruise on her left shoulder. 4 days old now. Healing. He'd been angry about her shift schedule. She'd picked up extra hours to save money for tuition. He said she was avoiding him, choosing work over them. The shove was almost casual, just hard enough to knock her into the kitchen counter. The corner caught her shoulder blade, and the pain was so sharp she'd bitten through her lip. He kissed the blood away, whispered apologies into her hair, bought her flowers the next morning. Sunflowers. Her favorite. She threw them away when he left for work, But she kept the card. She didn't know why. Some part of her still wanted evidence that he'd been good once, that she hadn't imagined it. Sarah pushed through the cafe door at 6:51 a.m. 4 minutes late. Her hands were shaking. She'd broken routine. The world felt tilted. Behind the counter, Beth was already pulling a pour-over. "Morning, hun." Warm, easy. The voice of someone whose biggest problem was remembering to switch out the oat milk before it expired. Sarah tried to smile. Managed something close enough. The air conditioning hit her damp skin, and she shivered. The jacket suddenly felt less like protection and more like a cage. She didn't notice the man in the corner booth. Not yet. Didn't notice the way his eyes tracked her movement. Didn't notice how his jaw tightened when she reached up to grab her apron and the sleeve slipped. Just 2 inches, just enough. But Jaxson James noticed everything. Jaxson James didn't drink coffee. Never had. Tasted like motor oil and broken promises. 2 things he'd had enough of before he turned 23. But he owned a dozen businesses across the Twin Cities, and 3 of them were coffee shops. Not because he understood the appeal of a $7 latte. Because coffee shops were information hubs. People talked. They let their guards down between the first sip and the second. They made deals. They gossiped. They revealed themselves. And Jaxson built empires on information. He'd walked into the brew at 6:38 a.m., early, even for him. He had a meeting at 8 with a city councilman who owed him a favor. Not money. Jaxson didn't deal in something as crude as cash debts. He dealt in leverage. The councilman had a gambling problem and a mistress in Bloomington. Jaxson had documentation of both. The councilman would vote the right way on the warehouse rezoning proposal. Everyone would get what they needed. That's how Jaxson operated. Clean. Efficient. No blood unless absolutely necessary. He'd taken the corner booth, the one with sightlines to both entrances and the back hallway. Old habit, the kind you develop when you've made the number of enemies Jaxson had made. Beth brought him hot water with lemon without asking. She'd worked for him long enough to know his order, long enough to know not to make small talk. "Quiet morning," she'd said, setting down the cup. "They usually are." His voice was low, controlled, the kind of voice that made people lean in to hear him instead of making him raise his volume. Power didn't shout. Beth nodded and retreated. Good. He wasn't here for conversation. He'd been reviewing contracts on his phone when the door chimed. 6:51 a.m. He noted the time automatically. Noted the way the girl who entered moved like she was trying to take up less space than her body required. Noted the jacket. Heavy denim. Ridiculous in this heat. Jaxson noticed things. It's what kept him alive. It's what made him dangerous. The girl was young. Early 20s maybe. Blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail that had started to frizz in the humidity. She had the kind of face that belonged in a college brochure. Wholesome, Midwestern. The girl next door, if the girl next door had forgotten how to make eye contact. She moved behind the counter. Employee, then. Her hands shook slightly as she tied on her apron. Jaxson watched over the rim of his cup. Not staring, just observing. There was a difference. Beth said something to her. The girl smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Jaxson had seen that smile before. On his mother's face, back when his father was still alive and still throwing punches, before Jaxson had grown tall enough to throw them back. The girl reached up to hang her jacket on the hook by the espresso machine. The movement was practiced, automatic, but the jacket was heavy and the hook was high, and for just a moment, for just 2 seconds, the sleeve slipped down her forearm. Jaxson saw the bruise, yellowing at the edges, purple-green in the center, finger-shaped. 4 distinct marks where someone had gripped too hard, and 1 thumbprint on the opposite side. Recent, maybe a week old. Something cold settled in Jackson's chest. Not anger, not yet. Anger was inefficient. This was calculation, assessment. The same process he used when identifying a business competitor or a threat to his territory. Someone had put their hands on this girl. Someone had squeezed hard enough to leave marks, and she was hiding it under denim in 90-degree heat. The sleeve fell back into place. The girl tugged it down farther, reflexive. She glanced around the cafe. Her eyes swept past Jackson's booth, kept moving, came back, stopped. For 3 seconds they looked at each other. Jaxson didn't move, didn't smile, didn't offer the kind of reassuring expression men usually gave to nervous women. He just held her gaze. Let her see him seeing her. Let her understand, without words, that he knew. That he'd witnessed what she'd tried to hide. Most men would have looked away, given her privacy, pretended they hadn't seen. That's what Minnesota Nice demanded. That's what polite society required. Jaxson James wasn't most men, and he'd never been polite. The girl's face went pale, then pink, then pale again. Her hand moved to her sleeve, tugging it down even though it was already in place. A tell, the kind poker players spend years trying to eliminate. She was afraid he'd seen, afraid of what he'd do with the information. She broke eye contact first, turned back to the espresso machine, started grinding beans with more focus than the task required. Jaxson set down his cup, pulled out his phone, opened a text thread with Marcus, his head of security. 3 words, need a name. Then he attached a photo. He'd taken it the moment the sleeve slipped. He'd been holding his phone anyway, perfect angle, clear shot of her face, clear shot of the bruise. Marcus replied in 40 seconds. On it. Jaxson pocketed his phone, stood, left a $50 bill on the table for a cup of hot water that cost nothing. Beth would know what it meant. It meant he was paying attention. It meant something in her cafe had caught his interest. It meant someone was about to have a very bad day. He walked past the counter on his way out. The girl didn't look up, but her shoulders tensed. She knew he was there, knew he was close, her hands stilled on the espresso machine. Jaxson paused, just for a moment, just long enough to let his presence register. Then he spoke. Quiet, meant only for her. You don't have to wear the jacket. 4 words, that's all. He didn't wait for a response, didn't need one. He pushed through the door into the morning heat and left her standing there, frozen, finally looking up at the space where he'd been. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She didn't know who he was, didn't know his name. But she knew with absolute certainty that everything had just changed. Have you ever needed a protector? Not the kind who just talks. Not the kind who offers thoughts and prayers and then scrolls past. The real kind. The kind who sees what you're hiding and doesn't look away. The kind who makes the decision you're too scared to make yourself. Sarah didn't know it yet, but she'd just met hers. And Jaxson James? He didn't make empty promises. He made problems disappear. If you want to see how far he'll go to protect someone who can't protect themselves, hit that subscribe button. Because this story is just getting started. We're about to dive into the investigation, into the secrets Sarah's ex-boyfriend thought he'd buried, into the moment when Minnesota Nice stops being nice and starts being necessary. This is about justice. Real justice. Not the kind that takes years in a courtroom. The kind that happens when someone with real power decides enough is enough. You've seen the bruises. You've felt Sarah's fear. Now you're about to see what happens when that fear meets someone who doesn't know how to back down. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. Because the next chapter reveals who Jaxson James really is in Minnesota. And trust me, you don't want to miss that. Comment below. would you trust someone like Jaxson? Or is power always dangerous, even when it's protecting you? Let's talk about it, because this conversation matters. Your story matters. And if you've ever worn a jacket in the summer to hide what you couldn't say out loud, I want you to know something. You're not alone. And your ending doesn't have to be written yet. Now, let's see what Jaxson does next. Marcus called back in 4 hours. That was slow for him. Usually, he had a full workup in 90 minutes. The delay meant complications. Complications meant the target was either very good at hiding or very connected. Either way, Jaxson wanted to know which. "Talk to me," Jaxson said, leaning back in his office chair. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked downtown Minneapolis. 37th floor. High enough that people looked like insects from up here. Jaxson liked the perspective. Reminded him that everyone was small when you had the right vantage point. Her name's Sarah Elizabeth Taylor. Marcus never bothered with preamble. They'd worked together too long for that. 23, University of Minnesota student, junior year, double major in social work and psychology, graduated high school in Duluth. Scholarship kid. Dean's List every semester until this spring. This spring, Jaxson repeated. What happened this spring? Grades dropped, started missing classes, withdrew from her internship at Hennepin County Social Services. That's a red flag. She'd been there for 18 months, glowing reviews. Then suddenly she emails her supervisor and says she needs to focus on personal matters. Jaxson pulled up his secondary monitor. Marcus was already sending files. Photos, documents. A digital paper trail that told a story Sarah probably didn't know anyone could read. The boyfriend. Derek Michael Castellano, 26, pharmaceutical sales, makes decent money, enough to look successful. Not enough to actually be successful, if you know what I mean. Jaxson knew exactly what he meant. The kind of guy who drove a leased BMW and wore a Rolex he was still making payments on. The kind who needed everyone to think he was more important than he was. Insecurity wrapped in cologne and false confidence. They started dating February of last year, Marcus continued. Met at a bar in Dinkytown. According to her roommate, Maya Chen, Sarah thought he was perfect. Brought her flowers, paid for everything. Love bombed her hard for the first 3 months. Then the roommate started noticing changes. Sarah stopped going out with friends. Stopped posting on social media. Derek didn't like her advertising herself, apparently. Classic isolation tactics. By month 6, Maya barely saw her. Sarah was either at Derek's apartment or at work. Nowhere else. Jaxson clicked through the photos Marcus had sent. Derek Castellano had that polished look. Gym membership he actually used. Hair product that cost more than most people's groceries. Teeth too white to be natural. The kind of face that photographed well. The kind that made parents think their daughter was dating a good guy. First incident on record was October, Marcus said. Neighbors in Derek's building called in a domestic disturbance. Shouting. Something breaking. Police showed up. Both of them said it was fine, just an argument. Sarah had a visible mark on her face. Officer noted it. She claimed she'd hit her face on a cabinet door. Officer believe her? Officer wrote it down and left. You know how it goes. Jaxson did. Cops couldn't do anything if the victim wouldn't press charges. And victims like Sarah, the ones who'd been isolated and manipulated and convinced they were somehow responsible for their own abuse, they never pressed charges. Not the first time, sometimes not ever. 2 more calls between October and March, Marcus continued. Same story both times. Neighbors hear noise, police respond. Sarah says everything's fine. Derek's always apologetic. always calm by the time cops arrived, textbook. Hospital visits? 3. 2 urgent care, 1 ER. First one was a sprained wrist in November. She told the doctor she fell while jogging. Second was February, possible concussion. Said she slipped on ice. Third was April. That's the interesting one. Jaxson leaned forward. Interesting how? Fractured rib. Bruising consistent with being struck or falling against a hard object. The ER doctor documented injuries consistent with domestic violence. Gave Sarah information for shelters and counseling services. Sarah refused everything, left AMA against medical advice. Something tightened in Jackson's jaw. He forced it to relax. Emotion was a liability, but the image of that girl in the cafe, pulling her sleeve down, trying to smile at customers while her rib was still healing, that image made something old and familiar stir in his chest. Derek Castellano, Jaxson said slowly. You said pharmaceutical sales. Which company? Meridian Biosystems. He's in their upper tier. Makes about $90,000 a year plus commissions. Meridian. Jaxson pulled up another screen. Ran a search through his business database. I know the regional VP. We play golf twice a year. He owes me for smoothing over that zoning issue with his lake house. Want me to make a call? Not yet. Keep digging. I want everything. Where he banks, where he drinks, who his friends are, every speeding ticket and every late payment. I want to know if he's got other women, other victims. Guys like this don't start with Sarah and they don't end with her. Already on it, Marcus said. Found something else, though. Might be nothing. Tell me. Derek's got a sealed juvenile record. Couldn't crack it yet, but I've got a contact in Hennepin County records. Should have it by tomorrow. Sealed juvenile record for what? That's what I'm trying to find out. But boss, it was sealed when he was 17. That's usually not for shoplifting, you know. Jaxson knew. Sealed records at 17 meant something serious enough that the courts wanted to give the kid a second chance. Could be assault, could be worse. Find out, and Marcus, check something else for me. What's that? See if Derek's got any connections to law enforcement. Family members, friends, anyone who might give him a heads up if someone starts asking questions. Silence on the other end. Then Marcus said, You thinking what I think you're thinking? I'm thinking that 3 domestic disturbance calls and 3 hospital visits is a pattern. I'm thinking that Sarah Taylor is still going to work in a jacket in 90-degree heat, which means she's still in contact with him, which means he's still a threat. And you want to eliminate the threat. I want to understand the threat, Jaxson corrected. Then I'll eliminate it. Boss, you know I'm with you on most things, but this girl, she doesn't work for you. She's not part of the organization. She's a stranger who happened to be in your coffee shop at the wrong time. The right time. What? She was there at the right time. Because if she hadn't been, if I hadn't seen that bruise, she'd still be going home to him. Still making excuses. Still thinking this is somehow normal or survivable or her fault. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. You want full surveillance? I want to know where Derek Castellano is every minute of every day. I want to know if he goes near that cafe. I want to know if he so much as texts her. And Marcus, do it quietly. If he's got any instincts at all, he'll know when someone's watching. I don't want him spooked, not yet. Understood. What about the girl, Sarah? What about her? Does she know you're doing this? Jaxson looked out the window. The city spread below him like a game board. All those people, all those secrets, all those small cruelties that happened behind closed doors because someone decided their pain was private and their fear was shameful. No, he said finally. She doesn't know. You going to tell her? Eventually, when the time is right. And when's that? Jaxson smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. When Derek Castellano finds out that touching Sarah Taylor was the biggest mistake he ever made. He ended the call, pulled up his contacts, scrolled to a name he hadn't called in 6 months. Detective Linda Morrison. Homicide. They had an arrangement. She looked the other way on certain business operations. He fed her information on cases the department couldn't crack through official channels. Mutually beneficial. Nothing in writing, everything deniable. She answered on the 3rd ring. Jaxson, it's been a while. I need a favor. Of course you do. What kind? The kind where you tell me everything you know about domestic violence. Resources in Minneapolis, shelters, restraining orders, how long they take, how effective they are. Morrison was quiet. Then she said, "This isn't your usual area of interest. Call it expanding my horizons. Call it what you want. But Jaxson, if you're asking what I think you're asking, be careful. Domestic situations are complicated. They're emotional. People make bad decisions. I don't make bad decisions. Everyone makes bad decisions when they're emotionally invested. I'm not emotionally invested. I'm strategically invested." Morrison laughed. It was a tired sound. "Sure you are. Send me details. I'll see what I can do." Jaxson hung up, pulled up the photo he'd taken at the cafe. Sarah's face, the fear in her eyes, the bruise on her arm. He studied it like he'd study a contract before signing, looking for loopholes, looking for leverage. Derek Castellano had built his power on fear and isolation. He'd convinced Sarah she was alone, that no one would believe her, that no one would help her. He was wrong on all 3 counts. And Jaxson James was about to teach him exactly how wrong. Derek showed up on a Tuesday. Sarah saw him through the front window before he saw her. That split second of recognition hit like ice water down her spine. He was crossing the street from the parking garage, wearing the navy suit he saved for important meetings. The one that made him look successful, trustworthy, like someone's favorite son-in-law. She dropped the milk steamer. It clattered against the counter. Beth looked up, concerned. But Sarah was already moving. Not thinking. Just moving. Muscle memory from a dozen other moments when she'd learned that escape was better than explanation. "Bathroom," she managed. Her voice sounded wrong. Too high, too tight. She pushed through the back hallway, past the storage room, past the employee lockers, into the single-stall bathroom that smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation. She locked the door, pressed her back against it, tried to remember how to breathe. Her phone buzzed. She knew without looking. He'd texted her 17 times in the last 3 days, each message slightly different but fundamentally the same. "I miss you. We need to talk. I'm sorry. You know I love you. Why are you doing this to us?" Us, like they were a unit. Like she didn't have her own thoughts, her own fears, her own body that still ached where he'd grabbed her last. She'd blocked his number 4 times. He kept calling from different phones. Work phone, friend's phone. Burner numbers she didn't recognize until she heard his voice on the voicemail. Always apologetic. Always reasonable. Always with that undercurrent of threat wrapped in concern. "I'm worried about you, Sarah. You're not thinking clearly. Let me help you." The bathroom door handle rattled. Sarah's heart stopped. "Occupied," she called out. Her voice cracked halfway through. "Sarah." Beth's voice. Concerned but not alarmed. "You okay, hon? You've been in there 10 minutes. 10 minutes. It felt like 10 seconds, like 10 hours. Sarah opened the door. Beth stood in the hallway, holding a bottle of water and wearing the expression of someone who'd seen this exact scenario play out before. Probably had. Women didn't work in service industry jobs for 15 years without learning to recognize the signs. "There's a man asking for you," Beth said carefully. "Says he's your boyfriend. Says you've been avoiding him and he's worried." "I'm not." Sarah's hands were shaking. She shoved them in her pockets. "He's not. We're not together anymore." Beth nodded slowly. "You want me to tell him you're not here?" "Would you?" "Already did. Told him you called in sick. He didn't believe me, but he left." Beth paused. "Sarah, this man, is he the reason for the jacket?" Sarah's throat closed. She couldn't speak, could only nod. Beth's expression hardened. Not angry at Sarah, angry for her. There was a difference. Okay, listen to me. My shift ends in 20 minutes. I'm driving you home. We're going out the back door. And tomorrow, you're not coming in until I tell you it's safe. I can't miss work. I need the hours." "You need to be alive more than you need minimum wage," Beth said flatly. "Come on, get your things." They left through the delivery entrance. Beth's car was a 10-year-old Honda with a busted air conditioner and a rosary hanging from the rearview mirror. Sarah had never been more grateful for either detail. Beth didn't ask questions on the drive, didn't offer advice, just drove and let Sarah sit in silence until they pulled up to her apartment building. "Tomorrow," Beth said. "Text me when you wake up. Don't come in until I tell you." Sarah nodded, got out, walked to her building on legs that felt disconnected from her body. She didn't notice the black Mercedes parked across the street, didn't notice the man inside watching her climb the stairs to her second-floor unit, but Jaxson James noticed everything. He'd been parked there for 3 hours. Marcus had called him 90 minutes ago with the update. Derek Castellano had driven into Minneapolis that morning, had gone to Sarah's apartment first, had waited outside for 40 minutes before giving up and heading downtown. Marcus's surveillance team had followed him to the cafe, had watched him try to talk his way past Beth, had watched him leave, frustrated, and Jaxson had watched Sarah run. That's what decided it for him. Not the bruises, not the hospital records, not even the sealed juvenile file Marcus had finally cracked open. Assault and battery at 17. A girl from his high school who'd pressed charges and then mysteriously dropped them 3 weeks later. Settled out of court. Family paid her off. Derek got counseling and a sealed record and learned nothing except that money solved problems. No, what decided it was watching Sarah's face when she saw him through that window. The way her entire body had responded to the threat before her mind could catch up. That was trauma. That was conditioning. That was what happened when someone spent months teaching you that your fear was justified and your escape was impossible. Jaxson waited until Sarah was inside her apartment. Lights on, door locked. Then he made a call. "Marcus, I need the Riverside property." "The safe house?" Marcus sounded surprised. "Boss, that's for witnesses, for people in actual danger." "She is in actual danger. She doesn't know you. She doesn't work for you. You can't just move random women into secure facilities because you've decided they need protecting. Watch me." Jaxson started his car. "Have it ready by tonight, fully stocked. And Marcus, I want 2 guards on rotation. Tell them it's a priority asset." "Priority asset," Marcus repeated slowly. "That's what we're calling her?" "That's what we're calling her." Jaxson drove the 3 blocks to Sarah's building, parked in visitor parking, took the stairs to the 2nd floor, found apartment 2C, knocked. No answer. He knocked again, harder this time. "Sarah Taylor," he called through the door. "My name is Jaxson James. I own the cafe where you work. I need to talk to you about Derek Castellano." Silence. Then quietly, "Go away?" I know he was there today. I know he's looking for you. And I know that jacket you're wearing isn't a fashion choice." More silence. Then the deadbolt clicked. The door opened 6 inches, chains still on. Sarah's face appeared in the gap. She looked younger without the forced smile, younger and more afraid. "How do you know Derek's name?" she asked. "Because I make it my business to know things. Can I come in?" "No." "Fair enough." Jaxson leaned against the door frame, kept his body language open, non-threatening. "Here's what's going to happen. Derek Castellano is not going to stop. Men like him don't stop, they escalate. You blocked his number, so he'll show up in person. You avoid him in person, so he'll wait outside your work, your apartment, your classes. He'll make it impossible for you to exist without running into him. I'll get a restraining order." Restraining orders are pieces of paper. They don't stop bullets and they don't stop fists. You know how many women are killed every year by men who had restraining orders against them? Sarah's face went paler. "What do you want?" "I want you to let me help you." "Why?" Good question. Jaxson had asked himself the same thing 15 times in the last 4 days. The truth was complicated. The truth involved his mother and his father and a childhood spent watching violence disguised as love. The truth involved the specific way Sarah had pulled down that sleeve, the practiced motion of someone who'd learned to hide damage. But Sarah didn't need the truth. She needed the simple version. "Because I can," Jaxson said. "I have resources. I have security. I have a place where Derek Castellano will never find you. All you have to do is say yes. I don't know you." "No, but you know him. You know what he's capable of. And you know, deep down, that it's going to get worse before it gets better." Jaxson paused. "I'm offering you a way out, not a permanent solution, just time. Time to think, time to plan, time to not look over your shoulder every 5 seconds. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back. "If I say yes, what happens? You pack a bag. I drive you somewhere safe. You stay there until we figure out a long-term solution. We? I don't abandon people I've decided to protect. You don't even know me. I know enough." Jaxson pulled out his phone, showed her the photo, the bruise on her arm, her face in profile, the fear in her eyes. "I know you've been hurting for a long time. I know you're too scared to ask for help, and I know that if someone doesn't intervene, Derek Castellano is going to put you in a hospital, or worse." Sarah stared at the photo. Her hand came up to her arm unconsciously, touching the place where the bruise had been. "How did you—" "I notice things. It's what I do." Jaxson pocketed his phone. "You have 5 seconds to decide, yes or no, because Derek knows where you live, and eventually he's going to stop knocking." The threat hung in the air between them. Not from Jaxson, from reality, from the inevitability of escalation, from the statistics that Sarah probably already knew. 75% of domestic violence murders happen after the victim leaves. The most dangerous time isn't during the abuse. It's during the escape. Sarah closed her eyes, took a breath that sounded like it hurt. Then she opened the door. "I need 10 minutes, she said. "To pack." "Take 15, Jaxson said. "I'm not going anywhere." He waited in the hallway while she moved around inside, heard drawers opening, heard the soft sound of crying quickly stifled, heard the zipper of a bag being closed. When she emerged, she was carrying a duffel bag and wearing a different jacket. Lighter this time, canvas instead of denim, but still long sleeves, still armor. "Ready?" Jaxson asked. Sarah nodded, didn't speak, didn't trust herself to speak. They took the stairs down. Jaxson went first, checking corners, checking sightlines. Old habits, useful habits. His car was parked close. He opened the passenger door for her. She hesitated before getting in. That last moment of doubt, that last chance to change her mind. "Sarah," Jaxson said quietly, "I'm not him. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm going to keep you safe. That's a promise." She searched his face, looking for the lie, looking for the trap. Found neither. Got in the car. Jaxson closed the door, walked around to the driver's side, started the engine, pulled out of the parking lot without looking back. In the rearview mirror, he caught Sarah watching him, not afraid, not yet, but cautious, calculating, trying to figure out if she'd just escaped one cage for another. He'd prove her wrong. Eventually, but for now, he just drove. Away from her apartment, away from Derek. Castellano, toward the riverside property where Marcus was already waiting with guards and groceries, and the kind of security that money couldn't usually buy. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked. Her voice was small. "Somewhere safe," Jaxson said. "Somewhere he'll never think to look." She nodded, turned to look out the window. Minneapolis passed by in streetlights and shadows, and for the first time in 14 months Sarah Taylor let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. Even if she didn't quite trust the man who'd decided to save her. The safe house was 40 minutes outside Minneapolis. Gated property, 3 acres. The kind of place that didn't show up on Google Maps because Jaxson had paid to keep it that way. Sarah had been there for 6 days when Derek finally made his mistake. He filed a missing persons report. Marcus called Jaxson at 2 a.m. He went to Minneapolis PD, claimed Sarah disappeared, said he's concerned for her safety, gave them her photo, her address, her work schedule, played the worried boyfriend perfectly. Jaxson was in his downtown office. Hadn't slept, hadn't gone home. He'd been working through Derek Castellanos' entire life, document by document, looking for the pressure point. Every man had one, the thing they couldn't afford to lose, the leverage that made them compliant. "Let me guess," Jaxson said. The officer he talked to was sympathetic. Very. Took detailed notes, said they'd look into it. Derek even cried, real tears apparently. He's escalating. He's panicking. Sarah's been off the grid for almost a week. No social media, no texts, no sightings. He can't control what he can't find. Jaxson pulled up a file on his computer, the sealed juvenile record, the assault charge, but also something else Marcus had found. 3 other women, 2 in high school, 1 in college. No charges filed, just whispered stories and deleted social media accounts and girls who'd transferred schools or moved away suddenly. Derek Castellano was a pattern, and patterns could be exposed. "Set up the meeting," Jaxson said. "Boss, you sure about this? We could just make him disappear, easier, cleaner." "I'm not making him disappear. I'm making him wish he had." Jaxson closed the file. "Tomorrow night, the warehouse on 3rd Avenue. Tell him I have information about Sarah's whereabouts. Tell him I'm a concerned citizen who wants to help." Marcus was quiet. "He's not going to come alone." "Good, I'm counting on it." The warehouse was one of Jackson's properties. Officially, it stored construction equipment. Unofficially, it was where Jaxson conducted business that required privacy, the kind of business that didn't leave paper trails or witnesses. Derek arrived at 8 p.m., right on time. He brought 2 friends. Both looked like they spent more time at the gym than the office. Both had the kind of build that was meant to intimidate. It might have worked on someone else. Jaxson was waiting in the center of the warehouse. Empty space, concrete floors, metal beams overhead. His own security was invisible. Marcus and 4 others positioned in the shadows. Derek wouldn't see them until it was too late. "Mr. Castellano," Jaxson said. His voice echoed in the space. "Thanks for coming." Derek stopped 10 feet away, close enough to talk, far enough to run if necessary. His friends flanked him, tried to look threatening, mostly looked nervous. "You said you know where Sarah is," Derek said. "No preamble, no small talk." "Good." They were both businessmen in their own way. "I do." "Where?" "First, let's talk about why she left." Derek's jaw tightened. "That's none of your business." "It became my business when she showed up at my cafe with bruises she was trying to hide. It became my business when I pulled her hospital records and saw 3 visits in 6 months. It became my business when I decided Sarah Taylor deserves better than you." One of Derek's friends stepped forward. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Jaxson didn't look at him, kept his eyes on Derek. "I'm Jaxson James, and if you don't know that name, your friend does. Don't you, Derek?" Derek had gone pale. He did know. Everyone in Minneapolis who mattered knew. Jaxson James, the man who owned half the city and controlled the other half, the man politicians called for favors, the man criminals avoided if they had any sense of self-preservation. "I want to see Sarah," Derek said. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. Small tremor. Fear he couldn't quite control. "No. She's my girlfriend. I have a right." "You have no rights." Jackson's voice went cold, flat. The tone he used when negotiation was over and consequences were beginning. "You put your hands on her. You isolated her from her friends. You made her afraid to exist. Those actions revoked any rights you thought you had. You can't keep me from her. I already have. She's been under my protection for 6 days, and she's going to stay under my protection until you're no longer a threat." Derek laughed. It was a desperate sound. "Protection? You're holding her prisoner. That's kidnapping. I could go to the police." "Please do." Jaxson smiled. It wasn't pleasant. "Tell them that Jaxson James kidnapped your girlfriend. Watch how fast they laugh you out of the station. Because, Derek, you're not important enough to matter, but I am." The friend spoke again. "This is bullshit. Come on, Derek, let's go." "Stay," Jaxson said quietly. The word was a command. Both friends froze. They'd felt it. That shift in the air, that moment when they realized they weren't in control and never had been. Lights came on overhead, harsh fluorescent. Marcus stepped out of the shadows, then the 4 others, all armed, not pointing weapons, just letting Derek see them, letting him understand the math. "Here's what's going to happen," Jaxson said. "You're going to leave Minneapolis tonight. You're going to transfer to your company's Denver office. I've already arranged it with your regional VP. He thinks you requested the transfer, thinks you're looking for new opportunities. I'm not leaving. Yes, you are. Because if you don't, I'm going to release certain information to certain people. Let's start with your employer. Meridian Biosystems has a strict ethics policy. Domestic violence doesn't play well with their corporate image. They'll fire you, not publicly, quietly, but you'll be unemployable in pharmaceutical sales. I'll make sure of it." Derek's face was red now, angry, cornered. "You can't prove anything." "I have hospital records, police reports, witness statements from your neighbors, photos of Sarah's injuries with timestamps and dates. I have the names of 3 other women you've hurt. I found 2 of them. They're willing to talk, willing to go on record." That hit. Derek's expression cracked, just for a second, just enough. "Then there's your sealed juvenile record," Jaxson continued. "Assault and battery at 17. The girl's name was Amanda Price. She was 16. You broke her jaw. Your family paid her $75,000 to drop the charges. I found Amanda. She lives in Wisconsin now. She's married, has 2 kids, and she's angry, very angry, because she spent 10 years watching you live your life while she has panic attacks in grocery stores. That was sealed, Derek whispered. Nothing's sealed if you know the right people. Jaxson pulled out his phone, showed Derek a document. This is a statement Amanda prepared, detailing what you did to her, what your family did to cover it up. If you don't leave Minneapolis tonight, this goes to every news outlet in the city. Minneapolis Star-Tribune, WCCO, Care 11, social media. Your face will be everywhere, and Derek, Minnesota doesn't forget, they'll bury you. Derek's friends were backing away. Slow steps, trying to distance themselves, trying to pretend they'd never been there. You can't do this, Derek said. But his voice was weak, defeated. I already have. Jaxson pocketed his phone. Marcus has your plane ticket. Denver, red-eye tonight. You leave in 3 hours. You don't contact Sarah. You don't text her, call her, email her, or show up anywhere she might be. You delete her number. You forget she exists. And if I don't? Jaxson stepped closer. Close enough that Derek had to look up to meet his eyes. Close enough that Derek could see exactly how serious this was. If you don't, I won't go to the press. I won't go to your employer. I'll handle this myself. And Derek, you really don't want me to handle this myself. Because I have resources you can't imagine. I have people who make problems disappear permanently. Not metaphorically, actually, permanently. It was a bluff. Mostly, Jaxson didn't kill people over domestic disputes, but Derek didn't know that. Derek was seeing his life crumble in real time, seeing every carefully constructed lie exposed, seeing his power, his control, his ability to hurt people without consequences. All of it stripped away by someone who had more power, more control, more resources. I loved her, Derek said, one last desperate attempt. No, Jaxson said, you didn't. Because love doesn't leave bruises. Love doesn't make someone afraid to go home. You wanted to own her. You wanted to control her. And when she tried to leave, you wanted to punish her. That's not love, that's possession. And I'm repossessing. Derek's shoulders sagged. He looked at his friends. They wouldn't meet his eyes. Looked at Marcus. Marcus held out an envelope. Plane ticket. Transfer papers. The systematic destruction of Derek Castellano's life in Minneapolis, all wrapped up neatly. 3 hours, Marcus said. Miss the flight and we release everything, every document, every witness, every dirty secret you thought you'd buried. Derek took the envelope. His hands were shaking badly now. Can I at least say goodbye? No. Please, just 5 minutes. I need to explain. No. Jackson's voice was final. You don't get to explain. You don't get closure. You don't get to make her feel guilty for surviving you. You get on a plane, you start over somewhere else, and you learn that actions have consequences. That's it. That's all you get. Derek stood there for a long moment, weighing options, looking for escape routes. There weren't any. Jaxson had made sure of that. Every exit blocked. Every alternative worse than the one being offered. Finally, Derek turned, started walking toward the warehouse door, stopped halfway, turned back. She'll never be yours, he said, spiteful, trying to land one last blow. She'll always remember me, always be afraid. Jaxson smiled. Maybe, but she won't be afraid of you, because you'll be in Denver and I'll be here, making sure you stay there. Derek left. His friends followed. The warehouse door closed. Marcus walked over to Jaxson. Think he'll actually go? Marcus asked. He'll go. He's a coward. Cowards always run when they're outmatched. And if he doesn't? Then we move to Plan B. What's Plan B? Jaxson didn't answer. Didn't need to. Marcus had worked for him long enough to know. Plan B was what happened when people didn't listen to reasonable solutions. Plan B was what Jaxson did when he stopped being patient. But Derek would listen. Jaxson was sure of it, because Derek Castellano had finally encountered something he couldn't manipulate or control, or hurt into submission. He'd encountered consequences. And consequences, unlike Derek's victims, didn't flinch. Jaxson left the warehouse 20 minutes later, drove back to his office, pulled up the security feed from the safe house. Sarah was in the living room, reading a book. One of the guards had brought her a stack from the library. She looked calm, peaceful. The jacket was gone. She was wearing a t-shirt, short sleeves. The bruises were visible but fading. She was healing. Jaxson watched her for a moment, told himself it was just to confirm she was safe, that his job was done, that Derek was leaving and Sarah could return to her life. But he knew better. Knew that somewhere in the last week this had stopped being about justice and started being about something more complicated, something he didn't have a name for yet. His phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. Flight confirmed. Derek boarded. He's gone. Jaxson typed back. Good. Keep surveillance on him for 6 months. If he so much as looks at a plane ticket back to Minneapolis, I want to know. Copy that. You going to tell Sarah? Jaxson looked at the security feed again. Sarah had fallen asleep in the chair, book open on her lap. She looked young, vulnerable, trusting, finally, that she was safe. Tomorrow, Jaxson typed. Let her sleep tonight. Let her have one more night without fear. He closed the laptop, leaned back in his chair. Outside his window, Minneapolis glittered in the darkness. His city, his responsibility, his territory to protect. And now, whether she knew it yet or not, Sarah Taylor was part of that territory. Derek Castellano had learned that the hard way. Anyone else who tried to hurt her would learn it too. 6 months later, Sarah stood in front of her mirror wearing a dress she never thought she'd be able to wear again. Sleeveless, navy blue, simple and elegant. The kind of dress that required confidence instead of armor. The bruises were gone. All of them. Not just the physical ones, though those had faded first. The invisible ones took longer. The ones that made her flinch at loud voices. The ones that made her check over her shoulder in parking lots. The ones that convinced her she deserved what happened. Those bruises took work. Therapy, time. And the kind of safety that let her nervous system finally understand it could stop running. She was graduating today, University of Minnesota, bachelor's degree in social work, dean's list this semester. She'd even gotten her internship back at Hennepin County Social Services. Her supervisor had welcomed her back with open arms and careful questions Sarah had finally learned to answer honestly. The apartment was hers now, not shared with a roommate, not temporary, hers. 1 bedroom in Uptown with good locks and better neighbors. Jaxson had offered to pay for it. She'd refused. Accepted a loan instead, with a payment plan and interest and all the dignity of earning her own security. She was still paying him back. Would be for another 2 years. But it felt important. Felt like reclaiming something Derek had tried to take. Her phone buzzed. Text from Maya. Outside, you ready? We're going to be late. Sarah grabbed her cap and gown, took one last look in the mirror. The girl, staring back, was different from the one who'd worn that denim jacket in July heat. Older, steadier, less afraid. She'd asked Jaxson once, 3 months ago, why he'd helped her. They'd been having coffee. Real coffee this time, not the surveillance kind. Just 2 people sitting in a cafe that had somehow become neutral ground. Because I could, he'd said. Same answer as before. But then he'd added something else. Something quieter. And because no one helped my mother. No one intervened. Everyone saw and everyone looked away. I promised myself I'd never be everyone. Sarah hadn't known what to say to that. Still didn't, so she'd just said, "Thank you." And he'd nodded, and they'd finished their coffee in comfortable silence. He'd be at graduation today. She'd invited him. Wasn't sure if he'd come. Jaxson James didn't seem like the type for ceremonies, but she'd wanted him to know he was welcome. Wanted him to see what his intervention had made possible. The ceremony was at Northrop Auditorium. 2,000 graduates. Sarah's name was called halfway through. Sarah Elizabeth Taylor, Bachelor of Science in Social Work, magna cum laude. She walked across the stage, shook hands with the dean, accepted her diploma. The crowd applauded, and in the back, standing instead of sitting, was Jaxson James. He wasn't clapping, just watching. But when their eyes met, he nodded once. That simple gesture meant more than any applause. After the ceremony, Sarah found him outside. Maya had wanted to take photos, but Sarah had asked for 5 minutes first. "You came," she said. "I said I would." "You say a lot of things." Jaxson smiled. Actually smiled. "Fair point. Congratulations, Sarah. You earned this." "I had help." "You had a chance. You're the one who took it." He paused. "I heard you're starting a nonprofit. Support services for domestic violence survivors. How did you—" Sarah stopped. Shook her head. "Right, you know everything. Not everything, just the things that matter." "Is that what I am, a thing that matters?" Jaxson looked at her for a long moment. The question wasn't casual. They both knew it. This was 6 months of careful distance and professional boundaries, and both of them pretending the night in the warehouse hadn't changed something fundamental. "Yes," he said finally. "You matter. To me. That's not something I say lightly." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks, not embarrassment. Something else. Something she wasn't quite ready to name yet. "The nonprofit needs funding. I was going to apply for grants, but I'll fund it. Seed money, enough to get started. And Sarah, before you argue, this isn't charity, it's an investment. In you. In what you're going to build. I've seen your business plan. It's good, better than good. You'll change lives." "Like you changed mine." "No, not like that. What I did was remove an obstacle. What you're doing is creating something. Building something that'll outlive both of us. That's different. That's better." Maya was calling from across the lawn, taking photos, demanding Sarah come pose with her family. Sarah waved. "1 minute." "I should go," she said. "You should." But Jaxson didn't move. Neither did Sarah. "Will I see you again?" she asked. "Or is this where you ride off into the sunset?" "Mission accomplished? Do you want to see me again?" Honest question. Deserved an honest answer. Sarah thought about it. About the man who'd terrified her ex-boyfriend into leaving the state, who'd given her safety when she couldn't find it herself, who'd been patient and distant and respectful in ways Derek never understood, who'd looked at her bruises and decided they mattered. "Yes," Sarah said, "I want to see you again." Jackson's expression softened, just slightly, just enough. "Then you will. Dinner, next week, somewhere public, somewhere you feel safe. Your choice of venue." "You're asking me on a date." "I'm asking if you'd like to have dinner with someone who thinks you're remarkable." "Remarkable?" Sarah tested the word, liked how it felt. "Okay, dinner, next week." "It's a date, then." Sarah walked away, joined Maya and her family for photos, put on her cap and gown and smiled for the camera. A real smile this time. Not practiced, not forced, just genuinely, completely happy. And across the lawn, Jaxson James watched her. Then he turned and left. Disappeared into the crowd the way he always did. Present when needed, gone when appropriate. Never demanding more than Sarah was ready to give. That night, Sarah posted a photo on Instagram. Her first post in 7 months. Just a picture of her diploma and her sleeveless dress, and a caption that said, "New Beginnings." 53 people liked it in the first hour. Maya commented with fire emojis. Beth from the cafe wrote, "So proud of you, honey." And one comment, posted anonymously, said simply, "You earned this." Sarah knew who it was from. Smiled, closed the app. The nonprofit launched 3 months later. Second Chances, she called it. Support services for domestic violence survivors, counseling, legal aid, housing assistance. Everything Sarah wished she'd had when she was wearing that jacket. Jaxson funded it, then helped her find other donors, connected her with the right people, stayed in the background mostly. Let Sarah be the face of her own organization. They had dinner once a week, sometimes twice. Public places, coffee shops, restaurants, building something slow and careful and based on choice instead of necessity. And on their 6th dinner, Sarah wore the navy blue dress again. Sleeveless, confident, ready. Jaxson noticed. Of course he noticed. "You look beautiful," he said. "I feel beautiful," Sarah replied. "That's different. That's new. Good different. The best different." They talked for 3 hours that night. About everything. About nothing. About the future Sarah was building and the past she was learning to leave behind. About trust and power and what it means to be safe. And when Jaxson drove her home, he walked her to her door but didn't ask to come in. Just waited until she was inside, until the locks clicked, until he knew she was secure, because that's what protectors did. They kept you safe even from themselves. Sarah watched from her window as he drove away. Then she looked at her reflection in the glass. Sleeveless dress, clear eyes, steady hands. She was free, not because someone had saved her, but because someone had given her the space and safety to save herself. So here's the question I want you to think about. Would you trust Jaxson James? A man who uses power and money and intimidation to get what he wants. Who operates outside the law when the law moves too slowly. Who decides who deserves protection and who deserves consequences. Is he a hero, or is he just another man who thinks his version of control is better than someone else's? Sarah trusted him, but Sarah was desperate. Sarah was drowning, and Jaxson threw her a rope. Does that make him good, or does it just make him convenient? Comment below. Tell me what you think. Because this story isn't just about Sarah and Derek and Jaxson. It's about power, about who has it, about how it's used, about the difference between protection and possession. It's about the bruises we hide and the jackets we wear, and the people who notice when we're not okay. And it's about asking the hard question. If someone offered you a way out, but that person was dangerous in their own right, would you take it? Would you trust Jaxson James? Would you wear the sleeveless dress? Or would you keep the jacket on just in case? Think about it. Share this story. Subscribe for more stories about justice and recovery and the complicated space between right and wrong. Because Sarah's story is finished. But there are 1,000 more stories out there. 1,000 more people wearing jackets in the summer. 1,000 more Derek Castellanos who think they can get away with it. And maybe, just maybe, a few more Jaxson James types who are willing to do something about it. The question is, what would you do? Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications. Let's talk about power, protection, and what happens when someone finally says enough. Sarah Taylor is free now. Who's next?